I need to open with the story we hadn't covered yet. We got to Joseph being in Egypt, and he had gotten to the point of the 7 years of plenty that prevailed in the land of Egypt had come to an end. No, maybe I didn't read that part. We got him married and having 2 sons, and fully integrated himself into the Egyptian culture and community. And then the 7 years of plenty are going on, and he organizes and administrates this ingathering of all of the surplus grain and a taxing of the people who are raising the grain of 20%, 1/5. But we assume the abundance meant that they weren't hurt by that process. So anyway, when all the land of Egypt was famished and the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph, what he says to you do." And since the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the world came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain, because the famine had become severe throughout the world. And then we pick up on 42. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you keep looking at one another? I have heard," he said, "that there is grain in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his other brothers, for he feared that harm may come to him. Thus the sons of Israel were among the other people who came down to buy grain, for the famine had reached the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over all the land. It was he who sold it to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. So now his dream has come true. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he said. And they said, "From the land of Canaan, to buy food." Although Joseph had recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Joseph also remembered the dreams that he had dreamed about them, and he said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said to him, "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." But he said to them, "No, you have come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of a certain man in the land of Canaan. The youngest, however, is now with our father. The one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is just as I have said to you, you are spies. Here is how you shall be tested. As Pharaoh lives, or I swear upon Pharaoh's life," different translations, "you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here." So, in a sense, they've spilled this information, and now if they're going to prove what they're saying, then the younger brother has to come, is kind of what's... we know Joseph wants to see his younger brother, but this, in the setting, this is like the test of their honesty. "Let one of you go and bring your brother, while the rest of you remain in prison. in order that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you, or else, as Pharaoh lives, surely you are spies. And he put them all together in prison for 3 days. And on the third day, Joseph said to them, do this, and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here while you are in prison. So he's changing the plan from all stay, but one goes. Now one will stay, and the rest will go. The rest of you shall go and carry grain for the famine of your households. Which indicates, if they're telling the truth, they really are in great need of food. And bring your youngest brother to me. Thus your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they agreed to do so, and they said to one another, alas, we are paying the penalty for what we did to our brother. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. So in a sense, they're getting in touch with their own anguish of being imprisoned and great threat and harm coming to them. Anyway, so it reminds them of Joseph pleading for his life. That is why this anguish has come upon us. Then Reuben answered them, I told you so. Did I not tell you not to wrong the boy? But you would not listen. Now there comes a reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood them, since he spoke with them through an interpreter. He turned away from them and wept. And then he returned and spoke to them, and he picked out Simeon and had him bound before their eyes. Joseph then gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to return every man's money to his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. This was done for them. They loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed, and when one of them opened the sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, meaning after one day's journey where they stopped, he saw his money at the top of the sack. He said to his brothers, my money has been put back. Here it is in my sack. At this they lost heart and turned trembling to one another, saying, what is this that God has done to us? And when they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, the man, the Lord of the land, spoke harshly to us and charged us with spying on the land. But we said to him, we are honest men, we are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, by this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me, take grain for the famine of your household, and go your way. Bring your youngest brother to me, and I shall know that you are not spies, but honest men. Then I will release your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. And as they were emptying their sacks, there in each one sack was the bag of money. Now here one found it the first day, and now the rest of them aren't finding it until they get home, which is indication of two different storylines. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, now that's interesting, bundles of money, not sacks of coins, but bundles of money. Anyway, I'll talk about it in a minute. They were dismayed, and their father Jacob said to them, I am the one you have bereaved of children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin. All this has happened to me. Then Reuben said to his father, you may kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you. But he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left. If harm should come to him on the journey that you are to make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. That's probably enough. It goes on and on and on and on. This is really a very unique biblical story that has so much detail and goes on for so long. Anyway, we know the listeners would follow along pretty well. Did anybody go to sleep, or did you stay awake in the story? It's an intriguing story. But anyway, this reunion of Joseph and his brother, there were two versions, an Elohist and a Yahwist version. And the Elohist highlights Reuben. When we get later on, it'll be in the let's see, that's the Elohist. It will be Judah in the Yahwist version, who is the brother who steps forward and takes charge and becomes the spokesman. But anyway, the money in the grain sacks discovered after they've returned all the way to Canaan in the Elohist version, but in the Yahwist version it is found along the way, that first. So we see those two differences. But both traditions assume that that Benjamin is still a young boy. We know the time frames kind of are questionable. And also it seems that the age difference between the brothers and Joseph has kind of collapsed and gotten erased there. And then we have also Jacob's name being used, and then Israel at different parts in the story. Now, Professor Vaughter, in his commentary, notes that it is unreasonable to think that Joseph, who had been the administrator over all of Egypt, to gather the grain and to organize the distribution once the famine came, would actually be there at one of the sites doling out grain and administering that kind of detail at one spot when he had the whole huge administrative job to do. So anyway, another thing I just skipped over was that famine was not unusual. We had Abraham and Sarah went down to Egypt because of a famine in the land, and then Isaac, there was a famine, but he didn't go all the way to Egypt. So there were times when there was a famine. We don't know if there was a huge worldwide famine like this story tells us, but there were different times with a change of seasons and so forth. But anyway, strange that Joseph would be right there, and that they, out of all the different cities they could have gone to, they happened to come to the one where Joseph is. And that seems a little illogical. If they were coming all the way that distance, they would probably stop at the most outlying city to ask for grain and not come to a central place where Joseph had the center of his administration. But nevertheless, that's the storyline is more important than the logic of the historic setting and so forth. Now, I had a thought. We can leave this all way, way, way back in history, but this is really not an everyday, but a real life situation that is unrolling before us. A lot of people in life, and you may be among that lot of people who have been wronged by somebody. Some really mean, nasty, unjust, something has happened and somebody did it to you. And time passes, and then you encounter them again. How do you feel when you see the person who has wronged you? Well, hi! How you doing? Good to see you. Or is it, I wish I didn't have to see you because seeing you reminds me and brings back all of that pain. And then if it's a situation where in order for that to happen to you, you were in the weaker, vulnerable position and they were in the power position. Now on this new encounter, that's reversed. You're in a power position and they're in a vulnerable position. Anybody had any of those turntable kind of things? But you may have had the ones of encountering somebody who's wronged you in the past, and it just, the shock of seeing them brought it all the pain back into your memory. You thought you're kind of over it, but no, it's still there. But anyway, if you've had that experience, you might kind of identify with Joseph a little bit. Here come these brothers, just boom, there they are. All of them, or almost all of them. So, now on the recognition question, it says Joseph recognized them. And actually, it would have been easier for him to recognize them than for them to recognize him. The easy part was it wasn't just one of them that he might see in a crowd. It was all 10 of them. So whatever clues and similarities would just add up to a pretty, oh my gosh, there are my brothers. The other part is they were dressed in their normal garb that he was used to seeing them in when he was one of them as a boy. And they were speaking their own language with whatever recognizable regional accents they may have had. And they were possibly, when they're talking to each other, he could hear them call a name as they're speaking to one another. I mean, I wouldn't think they would all go around every time they wanted to get one of the brothers' attention, would just all say, hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you. They would call out a name. So bingo, he's hearing names. And then some, or most, were already grown when he was sold into slavery. So there wouldn't have been that much change in their facial characteristics. There'd been some aging, but not a great radical change. If you've seen pictures of yourself or your friends in your first and second grade pictures, and then as a mature adult, you can maybe see some recognition, but there's big changes that take place over those years. So anyway, they had those kinds of things, but then when, on the other part, why didn't they recognize Joseph? Well, they had a lot of obstacles there. One was their custom of seeing each other was to let their beards grow. And he would have been clean shaven and maybe even head shaved as well if he was really a high officer in Pharaoh's court and had fully integrated into the culture, which would have been a stark difference. Also, his age, he would have been fairly young, so he would have done some transition of his appearance as he matured into a man. Different dress and clothing would be distracting. He was speaking a different language, and his voice probably would have changed some from a boy voice to a mature voice. And he was consciously using strongly Egyptian speech patterns to disguise himself even more. The interpreter would have interpreted what he was saying, but the phrases like, "As Pharaoh lives," or "I swear by the life of Pharaoh," "on the life of Pharaoh," I mean, those would have been Egyptian expressions that would have been distracting and still hiding his identity. And then the other one that, anybody have any others you might think? Well, exactly. That was, who could have dreamed in their wildest dreams this brother that was sold off into slavery and assumed to have probably died would have risen to such a high power? That how in the world could it have been? Another one would have been they were bowing and looking down and probably afraid to make eye contact and look him in the face, because that would have been a sign of arrogance or disrespect. I mean, you are humbled before this person, so you just hit the ground and bow. You're not looking at his face and staring at him and, kind of, who are you? Kind of posture. I mean, that's just the way to not get what you want or even get worse. So anyway, he is before them, and then he is another thing he's doing is feigning this fear of spies, because that was a very common thing among the Egyptians, that they were afraid that there would be spies. Some of these different tribes, and we know different groups would move in and out of this part of the world and conquer different territories. So they were suspicious. Not that they would lose their whole nation, but somebody may invade and try to take some of their outlying cities. Now, subconsciously, their mind's eye may have caught some recognition, for their conversation goes right to their guilt about having sold Joseph. So, there are things, the mind works really fast. One of the things I have noticed is that when someone is having a conversation and then they'll use some kind of common idiom, so often the idiom matches the topic of the conversation. And it's, puns and so forth, that it happens so often and it happens so quick, you didn't have time to search for that and think it. The mind just made the connection and it just rolled right off the tongue. Well, anyway, the mind is like a computer, and it can do those kinds of things before our conscious awareness. And so that may have also been happening. There may have been something that was familiar. It didn't come to their conscious awareness, but triggered the memories to start thinking about Joseph and what they had done to him. Anyway, but it's also stimulated somewhat when he asks them to bring the youngest brother, Benjamin, as they are, explaining who they are and all that kind of stuff, and they betray the fact there is a younger brother at home, and they're arguing, trying to say they're honest, they're not spies, they're just, a big family of guys that have a lot of people at home and they need food, and so forth. Now we've got the part, the narrative does not tell us what Joseph is thinking. It doesn't give us his reason for playing this game with them. Now, at the very least, it's upsetting to the brothers for him to play this game with them. But at the extreme level, they're scared to death. They could die. They don't know what this powerful man is going to do with them or do to them. And if the reality is, if he really believes they are spies, he could have them summarily executed. So their lives are quite vulnerable here at this point. But why is Joseph doing this to them? Why didn't he just say, "Oh, my brothers, it's me"? Well, Professor Vaughter suggests it was a plan to ensure that his whole family would come down to Egypt for the reunion. Not just a reunion with these brothers, they go home and then never come back. He is playing the game in order to ensure that his father and his younger brother and all the rest of the clan will come to Egypt, where he can take care of them. Vaughter says that the brothers and Jacob and Israel would need some conditioning, some adjusting to the idea of leaving the land of Canaan and coming down to Egypt, and actually moving down there, not just running back and forth. So they have to be prepared to make that decision. So it's going to take a little time to get that to happen. Vaughter suggests that Joseph wants his brothers also to suffer some mental anguish for their sin against him. So first he imprisons all of them for the 3 days so they can experience the prison life and know what that's like. Any of y'all ever had to be in jail? That's we don't have, most of us don't have that experience. And so we can hear about it and we can see movies, but to really be there and then have the doors closed and locked, and your sense of total vulnerability to the system or whoever else is in that cage with you can be very, very, very frightening. So he wants them to experience some of that mental anguish. But then it's only for 3 days, and then he changes his idea that instead of only one going to get Benjamin, then all of them would go back with the grain and then bring Benjamin, but one would be held hostage, and it's Simeon. And in the story, the brothers, as I said, have revealed a lot about the family in their talking. But when Joseph goes to them, on the 3rd day, Joseph says to them, "Do this, and you will live, for I am a God-fearing man." Well, that expression, "and you will live," implies if you don't, then you will die. if you don't cooperate completely, and it's a subtle way of showing their plight. On the third day is a very common biblical expression, and generally it means there's been a passage of time, and in that passage of time, conditions have changed. Something has altered, a mood or a context or a situation. Now, for us Christians, we're a week away from on the third day when conditions have changed. For our Easter after Good Friday, resurrection and life after crucifixion and death, on the third day, conditions changed kind of radically there. But several other transitions that we've gone over in Genesis already. But anyway, he professes to be a God-fearing man, which means here he will give his brothers the benefit of the doubt. For he doesn't want to be unjust and treat them unfairly. He wants to be a good man. He's a God-fearing man. He wants to do what is right. And so he's going to change his plan, but he's not going to be totally soft-headed. He will keep one as a prisoner or a slave until the others prove their story about their family by bringing the last and the youngest brother to Egypt. Now, this situation of not being soft-headed, wanting to be fair and to trust what they're saying is true. We at the church are in this dilemma all the time when folks come to us with a story and they want help, and the help they want is for us to give them money to solve some big problem they've just described to us. We're God-fearing people. We want to be fair and just, but it doesn't take very long to gain the experience that a lot of those stories have very little truth to them. And the story on its surface is true. This person's life is a mess and they need money. But as we check out the story, a lot of times is what they're telling us the need for the money would go for is not true. It's something else. And so, we want to be fair, we want to be caring, but we can't be soft-headed. We have to check out the story and confirm that things are true. I remember one crazy one when I was still out in St. Stephen's, and a lady had come and she drove up in a big Eldorado kind of big nice vehicle, and her concern was she's short of money and her cable bill is due, and she signed a contract and she wants to honor the contract, but she's not managed her money well and wants me to give her the money to pay her cable bill so they won't cut it off. What should I have done? I told her, I don't have cable, I can't afford cable, and I do not see that your situation. I appreciate your desire to be honest and honor your contracts, but I don't see that it's my responsibility to rescue you from that dilemma. And then she comes up, well, I could call some relatives and get some money. That's a good idea. Why don't you try that? But, that's a true story. This woman really did. She came and wanted me to help her with her cable bill so she could be an honest person. Anyway, but if she couldn't manage her money, how would she come back and pay me back? Anyway, so this dilemma of being a God-fearing person, trying to do what's right, and giving people a benefit of the doubt, there needs to be some accountability. And that's what holding Simeon is going to do, some accountability for this. And again, in the midst of this, the brothers rehearse their sin as the cause for their present problems. Their guilty consciences make them interpret this bad luck as punishment. It's kind of what goes around comes around. And the writer of Genesis, the redactor, inserts Joseph's turning aside and weeping. And he believes, Vaughter is saying, this is to show that this ruse is really not being motivated by anger and vengeful retribution, but rather is a calculated process to kind of nurture and guide them through the processes of remorse and self-examination in order to prepare them for a forgiving reunion. How would you vote? He's really mad at them and he wants to make them suffer, or he's preparing them to be contrite and to appreciate the forgiving reunion when that time comes. Well, we have to, and this is part of the Lenten self-denial and prayer time, is to practice self-examination, because we are creatures with mixed motives. We can think we have the best and the highest motives, but if we just kind of meditate a little bit, we can get some less pure motives that are riding along and have mixed motives. Sometimes, we can be doing the right thing for the right reasons, and then sometimes we can do the right thing and maybe not the right reasons. For example, just a real simple one, gift giving. We give gifts because we love somebody and we care about them and we want to make them happy. But that can be the motive that's starting with, but then after we kind of get carried away and go overboard and spend more than we thought we should, and we realize we're overly generous, and now maybe they owe us something like thank yous and appreciation and oh, I love you, and all of a sudden it wasn't just totally one motive. Other motives can kind of creep in. So we can be people with mixed motives, and we have to deal with some of that motivation and try to keep on track and stay with the best motives for doing things. Because if we end up following the wrong motives, then we can derail the process and it can be counterproductive. sometimes overly generous gifts can create a problem in the relationship. It makes it awkward. Anyway. Well, Simeon, Vaughter tells us, is the one chosen in this story because in the Aloist version, he is Joseph's champion. And that didn't click in my mind of what incident made that so, and I didn't have time to go back and hunt and try to find that. Does that jump to anybody's mind? Joseph and Simeon having a connection in the Aloist? I'm not sure. I'll have to just let that ride or go research it some more. But anyway, but then the story moves along, and the brothers receive their provisions, and they're heading back. But before they go, Joseph had ordered that the money be placed back in their grain sacks. Now, this detail of that gesture raises some questions in my mind. Did the brothers go down to Egypt to each one negotiate a deal for the grain with his own bundle of money or sack of coins and do it individually? Or had they gone as a group and pooled the resources in order to make one big purchase for the whole clan? Now, it seems like if each had money in his own bag, it was the former. And it also seems like there may have been a quota at the distribution point, and only a certain amount per family. So if the brothers were all one family, they only got that one family's quota. But if they divided themselves up into each brother had a family unit, a wife and children, then they would come each one as a family to get a family quota, which seems more logical in that process. So, we don't know. But anyway, in verse 27, it says, "At the first night of encampment, one brother gets some grain to feed his donkey and discovers the money in the mouth of the grain sack." Now, the Yahwist version, he finds the money early. Now, there are some other details here that says Pharaoh said that, give them their grain and provisions for the journey. Now, we've got money in the grain sack, particularly when they get home. But if the money might have been in one storyline in the sack of provisions that were gathered to help them for the journey. The grain is for when they get home. They need provisions for the journey. And so the money could have been there. But anyway, again, two indications of two storylines of where details go different directions. Now, the Aloist version in verse 35, when they're home and emptying the sacks, they do find the money there. They do not recognize the money as a gift of a generous Egyptian official. They see it as some kind of trap. They're being set up. They're being framed for the next time they go. I mean, he's already been playing games with him. Now they're setting him up. He's going to do something else. What is on his mind? But anyway, the other thing that I found very curious is they saw their bundles of money in the New Revised Standard Version. At this great distance, way back into antiquity, bundles of money in our minds means paper money. Just for us moderns to understand a big chunk of money, because we don't understand the coinage or the kind of way of trade in those times. That's what I would assume, because even at the time of the Exodus and the time of the freedom from the Babylonian captivity, that still wouldn't have had printing presses to create much paper currency. So it seems anachronistic. But anyway, and of course, they couldn't use a credit card or write a check or have a letter of credit. It seems more likely this is just that metaphor. And also difficult for shepherds to have much money. I would think that whole process of selling grain, they would have been gathering jewels, they would have been gathering gold, they would have been gathering livestock, that people in the famine, they would bring their scrawny, skinny animals, and they would leave them, and then they could be fattened up, but there would be trading all kinds of other things for food rather than a cash economy. So anyway, the type of money is not really important to the story. The dilemma is that Simeon will be lost if they and their father Jacob, Israel, refuses to send Benjamin back. But if they go back, they are accused of spies, and now they've had this money put in their sacks, so they could be accused of being thieves. And so either they lose one brother, or they go back and risk all of them being lost. And we have Jacob being afraid all of his sons will die. Now at this point we find Reuben, the eldest, offering himself and his 2 sons as security. You can kill my sons if I do not return. And it's a very honorable, magnanimous offer. Not sure how the sons would feel about that if they're overhearing this conversation. But Jacob declines. He loves Benjamin and selfishly thinks of his own grief over Joseph and fear for Benjamin. But he seems to have little concern about Simeon at this point. But Vaughter suggests, and also Von Rad suggests, that the 2 different versions of the story, in one, Simeon isn't kept. They all go home, and if they're going to get further help as the famine continues, then they have to bring Benjamin the next time. And so it's easy for Jacob, Israel, to say, no, you're not taking Benjamin when they come back and make the report, because there is no Simeon in captivity with that version of the story. But then when we get down later, it comes back up. Simeon is down there. We've got to rescue him. So anyway, the famine persists, and they're going to have to go back and return to Egypt. But before we move on, there were a couple of other things that Von Rad had shared in his commentary that were interesting. And that is the droughts and the famines in Palestine were fairly common, but even the soil there was not good. But they could raise a little bit of grain, but usually they did have to go to Egypt and get grain and trade fairly often. But we do have the parable that Jesus gives us of the sower. Sow the grain on the rocky part and in the path, and then there's some fertile soil. So that parable indicates that they did raise some grain within Palestine, but there was lots of rocky soil and lots of bad places where they could not have productive crops, so they did have to trade. Now, the question is, did Joseph really suspect them of being spies? We don't know, but that can be the plot. But Von Rad suggests that Joseph changing the game plan from keeping 9 in prison and sending 1 to keeping 1 and sending the 9 back was a change of his mind, that he could have been thinking, if they really are starving indeed, 1 can't carry enough grain to help out all the family. So I'll keep 1 and send the rest with enough grain to keep everybody alive. And the everybody that he's thinking about is his father and his own clan. And then the other part, he said he could be realizing that if only 1 comes back, Jacob could very well say, I've lost everybody but whoever came back in Benjamin. I'm not going to lose the last 2. And so it reduces the possibility of Joseph getting Jacob and Benjamin to come and have this reunion. Then on the binding of Simeon and holding him captive is one thing, but for the other 9 to return to the father and repeat what they had done concerning Joseph, they're going to have to repeat. They were away tending sheep, and then they come home and tell their father, we've lost 1. And they tell him that he's died, but this is, again, repeating that dynamic of having to go home and tell Daddy the bad news. We failed to take care of our brother. And so they're reliving what had happened with Joseph. And again, that's kind of working on their sense of guilt and processing that history. Joseph's replacement of the money was a show of hospitality to his brothers, that they were guests. But the ambiguity of the situation does not allow them to recognize this gracious act as a gift. It rather causes fear. And a lot of times our guilts do make us fearful because we don't have a clear conscience, and we worry because we are aware that consequences happen, and we never know. But anyway, next Sunday is going to be Easter, and when we have a big Christmas or Easter time, and with 3 services, it disrupts our time. We've tried to move to the Rose Chapel, but all of your schedules are so crazy. Last time we tried that, there were only 4 of us, and two of the 4 were visitors from another class. So we went to the library and had coffee. But anyway, next Sunday we will not meet as a class because of the 3 services coming and going in here. I'm not sure what's going to happen the next week. We've been having Bobby to the doctor, trying to diagnose some issues with him, and we've determined we need to go to Mayo's, and we're leaving Tuesday, and not sure how long all the testing and whatnot's going to take. The main issue, he's got gallstones and is probably going to have gallbladder removal surgery. And but there are some other issues with his pancreas. He's got pancreatitis, and he's got some liver issues, and So anyway, we're going to where all the experts are. It's a rare condition that might be happening, and then again, it might just be a sick gallbladder is kicking off these signals. But since it's rare, since it's young, we're going to go get the best minds and experience on that. So it's an uncertain timeline. I was supposed to be preaching on the 12th, and I was going to preach about Joseph and his managing the famine and an environmental crisis, a climate change in Egypt, and what was their response. So many lessons there that I was going to use our class time to do that, and now I'm canceled and someone else is going to fill in because my return is uncertain. So I don't know what will happen just on Sunday after Easter. But I'll take my stuff. I'll be ready if I'm back. But anyway, just that's what's happening. So pray for us that we have a safe journey and things turn out best possible. Let us pray.